Welcome to the first episode of Under Suspicion, a new podcast delving into real-life murder cases in the UK. I'm your host, Sian McGuinness, and in this inaugural episode, I'll be exploring the murder of BBC journalist Jill Dando as we approach the 20th anniversary of her death. Dando was born on the 9th of November 1961 in Weston-super-Mare to parents Jack and Winifred Dando. Jill studied journalism at university and later became a trainee reporter at a local paper in Weston-super-Mare, following in the footsteps of her father and older brother who also wrote for the paper. After a stint in print journalism, Dando branched into regional news with BBC Radio and soon found herself reading national TV bulletins. She worked on a variety of BBC programmes, including The Breakfast News and travel show Holiday, but by 1999 she was probably best known for presenting BBC's Crime Watch, a show which reconstructs unsolved cases and appeals to the public for information. Jill was a much-loved figure and easily recognisable to the British public. In 1997 she was even awarded the BBC Personality of the Year. Jill owned a terrace in Fulham on Gowan Avenue, but was engaged to partner Alan Farthing, and at the time of her murder spent most of her time at his home in Chiswick. Jill planned to sell her own home, with the pair's wedding set for September of 1999, and only returned to the terrace occasionally to check on the property and pick up clothes. On the morning of the 26th of April 1999, 37-year-old Jill left her fiancé's home at around 8 a.m. and called into King's Mall in Hammersmith to do some shopping before heading back to her own property. CCTV showed her leaving the mall and heading back to Fulham in her blue BMW. She arrived home at around 11:30 a.m. As Jill prepared to unlock her front door, she was grabbed from behind and forced to the ground. She was held down by her assailant's right hand, while their left hand held a 9mm caliber semi-automatic pistol to her left temple and shot her, likely killing her on impact. The gunshot couldn't be heard by people nearby, as holding the gun so close to her head muffled the sound, as well as minimising blood splatter. One neighbour, Richard Hughes, said he had heard Jill make a sound of shock, like somebody had surprised her, but didn't think much of it, and definitely didn't suspect any harm had come to Jill. Hughes then saw a man, almost certainly Jill's killer, leaving her property. He described him as around 6 foot, white and well-dressed, wearing a barber-style jacket. Another witness, Barry Lindsay, told police that he had driven past Jill's house and had seen her arguing with a man on her doorstep. He had not realised it was Jill Dando until after the news broke about her murder. He described the man as dark-haired and olive-skinned, likely of Mediterranean descent. He said that Jill had a look of terror on her face. Lindsay also told police that he had heard a gunshot louder than a firework as he drove down the street, despite none of Jill's neighbours testifying to hearing the gun. Jill was found 14 minutes later by neighbour and friend Helen Doble, who called 999, initially believing that Jill had been stabbed. In the call, Doble, who also worked in television, described how Jill was collapsed in a pool of her own blood, her arms turning blue. As Helen approached Jill to see if she was still breathing, she sobbed as she said, "I don't think she's alive." Another neighbour passing by ran to the local doctor's surgery to look for help. PC Colin Jones was the first officer to arrive at the scene. He felt for a pulse but was unable to find one. He told the court how her white coat and face were covered with blood. A cartridge was also found next to Jill's body. An ambulance shortly arrived and lengthy attempts were made to resuscitate Jill, but they were unsuccessful. She was rushed to Charing Cross Hospital, where she was pronounced dead on arrival. Police began investigating the case, which garnered huge media attention due to Jill's status as a public figure. Crime Watch aired a reconstruction of the shooting, hoping to find the person that had killed one of their own, and The Sun and the Daily Mail each offered a £100,000 reward to find the killer. Many theories began circulating, but with such a lack of evidence, the police struggled to find a suspect. The murder had taken place incredibly quickly. Jill had left her car and hadn't even put her key in the door by the time she was attacked. Nobody had seen or heard the murder take place, and no one had gotten a clear view of the killer's face. There was also a lack of forensic evidence, and it appeared that the gun used was either a personalised model or a replica that had been converted, so it was difficult to place. Police began the obvious lines of investigation, looking into Jill's fiancé and previous lovers. But Farthing had a solid alibi, and Jill had no jealous exes. Farthing told the media how he was unable to comprehend how anyone could have been able to murder Jill. Police believed that Jill may have been killed by a stalker. This theory was further backed up by Jill's brother, Nigel, who said Jill had complained to him over the phone about being pestered by a man just days before her death. Over 2,500 people were interviewed as part of the murder investigation, and the police took over 1,000 statements. A reward of £250,000 was even offered to help catch Jill's killer. A year after Jill's death, the police still had no suspects, and they made a fresh appeal for information. They received a tip-off from 2 workers at the Hammersmith and Fulham Action for Disability Centre about Barry George, an unemployed musician who had turned up at the centre on the morning of Jill's murder. According to the workers, George, who lived just around the corner from Jill, had arrived at the centre around 11:50 a.m. without an appointment and appeared agitated. George had visited the centre previously for help with severe Asperger's syndrome and several personality disorders, including narcissistic personality disorder and ADHD. It was also possible that he suffered with paranoid personality disorder. As he didn't have an appointment at the centre, staff were unable to see him. He booked a time to come back the next day. However, he missed this appointment and didn't return to the centre until 2 days after Jill's murder. He told Action staff that he had missed his appointment because he had been laying flowers at the site of Jill's murder. The staff also said he had begun asking strange questions, such as what time exactly he had visited the centre on the day of the shooting, almost as if he were trying to get a straight alibi. Other witnesses also put George on Gowan Avenue around the time of Jill's murder, stating he was displaying agitated and threatening behaviour. Police then began surveillance of George, who had a previous history of stalking and sexual offences. He had most recently been accused of following women around Gowan Avenue, sometimes even up to their doorsteps. George was also a known fantasist and liar. He often used pseudonyms and told people he was in the SAS, while he was actually a member of the TA and a local gun club, or that he was Freddie Mercury's cousin. He sometimes stood in the street directing traffic, and had even convinced a stadium that he was a stuntman named Steve Majors and was allowed to stage a show where he attempted to jump over 4 double-decker buses in roller skates, resulting in his injury. Notably, George had also been arrested at Kensington Palace, the then home of Charles and Diana, where he was found hiding on the grounds wearing a balaclava and carrying a hunting knife and rope. Police found a number of strange things in George's flat, including photographs of female newsreaders, which he had taken from his TV, as well as newspaper clippings about Jill's upcoming wedding and her death, despite him denying that he knew her. There were also pictures of weapons. George was arrested on suspicion of Jill's murder on the 25th of May 2000 and held for 84 hours before being formally charged at West London Magistrates Court. No bail was granted. His case began in late February 2001, and he was convicted at the Old Bailey on the 2nd of July, where he was handed a life sentence. George was convicted on a single piece of evidence, a gunshot residue particle which was found on the inside of his coat and was consistent with the residue found in Jill's hair. But nothing else linked him to the scene of the crime. There was no other forensic evidence to place him at Jill's house. He didn't match Barry Lindsay's descriptions, and even the timings seemed off. Police theorised that George shot Jill, went home and changed, and headed for the disability centre, a series of events which should have taken at least half an hour, but he supposedly managed to do it in less than 20 minutes. There was also nothing found in George's flat linking him to the scene of the crime. George unsuccessfully appealed the trial twice, and it was only on his third appeal that he was granted a retrial in November 2007, having already spent 6 years in prison. His second trial lasted for 8 weeks, and his conviction was overturned due to lack of evidence. Barry George was acquitted of Jill Dando's murder on the 1st of August 2008. In 2019, Jill's murder remains unsolved. However, there are still many theories related to the case. One popular theory, often referred to as the Yugoslav theory, is that a hit was put out on Jill by Serbian warlords in retaliation to an appeal she made on the BBC for Kosovar Albanian refugees. The appeal followed a NATO bombing on a radio and TV station in Serbia, which it said warlords used to spread dangerous propaganda. Friends of warlords died in the bombing, and they were angry. Although this is one of the more popular theories, it has been pointed out that if a Serbian warlord had put the hit out, they would likely have taken credit for it. Another popular theory out there is that Jill was investigating a paedophile ring within the BBC. It is believed that she had a dossier with high-profile names accused of offences, including the now-known paedophile Jimmy Savile, that she was going to expose. Jill apparently gave the dossier to the BBC's senior management, stating that she was going to go public with the information on Crime Watch, but was told that she did not have enough evidence and that no one wanted to know. This theory has only gained traction in the past years, as many high-profile names at the BBC have subsequently been accused and charged with sexual offences against children. A final theory suggests that Jill was murdered by, or on the orders of, a criminal who had been convicted as a result of a Crime Watch appeal she had made. There is a lot of conflicting evidence relating to the theories of a professional killer murdering Jill. On one hand, the murder was executed quickly and quietly, with little noise or blood splatter, and hardly any evidence left at the crime scene, suggesting the killer knew what they were doing. On the other hand, Jill rarely visited her house in Gowan Avenue, and when she did, it was not always at the same time. Police confirmed from the CCTV that she was not followed home from her fiancé's house or the shopping centre, so how would a hired killer have known when she was home? There is also the case of the gun, which was most likely a workshop conversion. A professional hitman wouldn't be likely to use such a weapon. 20 years after her death, Jill Dando's murder is still one of the most famous cases in UK history. Jill's family did not ask for the case to be reopened after Barry George's acquittal, but a decade later, people are still looking for clues as to who killed Jill Dando. Thanks for joining me for the first episode of Under Suspicion. For more information, head to www.undersuspicionpodcast.blogspot.com, where you can find more information about this case, as well as the link to our Patreon.